Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I move the following amendment in this second reading motion, that all words after that be omitted with a view to substituting the following words. Whilst not declining to give the bill a second reading, the House notes that 1. On the eve of a federal election, the Albanese government has been forced to work around their own Environment Minister in an attempt to fix a political mess of their own making. 2. The government remains bitterly divided on the future of salmon farming at Macquarie Harbour and has unleashed 15 months of anxiety and uncertainty on thousands of workers, families and communities who rely on the salmon industry, including voting against a coalition bill to improve the reconsideration process in the most recent sitting week of Parliament. 3. The legislation is not needed to provide lasting certainty to the Tasmanian salmon industry, and instead the government should simply have ended the Minister for the Environment's disastrous 2023 review of salmon farming's future at Macquarie Harbour. 4. The government, and particularly the Environment Minister, must guarantee to not instigate other forms of legislation or regulations that will impose new controls or reviews on the salmon industry, including through the return of their nature-positive legislation, federal EPA, or use other forms of the EPBC Act, such as directed environmental audits. And 5. The changes to the reconsiderations regime in the bill should be substantially strengthened to ensure that all assessments of all projects across all industries do not remain subject to the open-ended review processes that currently exist. Deputy Speaker, the Coalition will support this bill. We do so in recognition of the urgent need to put an end to the living hell that salmon businesses and workers in Tasmania have endured under this Albanese government, and in particular under the actions of their Environment Minister. We have made the decision to support the bill's passage because it provides at least some small measure of comfort and relief to the Tasmanian salmon industry and its workers after a truly harrowing period. However, no one should be fooled into thinking that this bill is, to the Labor Party, what its drafting may suggest. By way of this bill, Tasmanian salmon businesses and workers are being used as a bargaining chip in Labor's intensifying internal war on environmental issues. To Labor, this legislation isn't principally about Tasmanian salmon workers and their families. It's about factional games, internal warfare, and political fixes inside Labor itself. And it's a reflection of a long-standing and intensifying feud, not just between the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister, but a feud between many in the ranks of the Labor caucus on environmental policy. We have recently learnt about heated debate within caucus itself, where the Prime Minister has seemingly traded off. On one hand, he has won his desire to end the Minister's review on the future of salmon farming in Tasmania, but on the other, agreed to the Minister again pursuing the creation of a federal Environment Protection Authority and, of course, the disastrous nature-positive agenda. This approach, if implemented, will cause another massive rise in green tape, severely damage investment in jobs and cause many further cost of living increases in the process. And so it may look, at first blush, that the Prime Minister has to find a way around the Minister in order to close off this review, and there is indeed truth to that. There really is. But it is far deeper than even that. This is all about something far darker, and it is yet another marker of the dark arts of the Albanese Labor government of playing politics for internal political processes, because a dirty deal has clearly been done. Now, putting the miserable internal machinations of the Labor government to the side, the very fact that salmon companies and workers in Tasmania are needing relief is a direct consequence of the minister's reckless decision to launch a full-throttle attack on this industry in the first place. For nearly 15 months, the government has left the industry exposed to a review that has placed their entire future in jeopardy. And they have resisted all sensible offers and advice from the coalition to set this right. It should be noted. It was as recently as the very last sitting week of this parliament, on the 12th of February in fact, that the Labor government voted against this very kind of legislation when it was the coalition which brought it forward through a bill to help the salmon industry and change the EPBC reconsideration process. Any pretence from Labor that they really want to help the salmon industry and the workers in Tasmania is a sick joke, because the history exposes the truth. Now, it is for these reasons and more that we will be moving the amendments which I just have read out at the front end of this address. And the purpose of those amendments is to try and redress some of Labor's many errors and missteps in association with the bill they put forward today, and to try to provide more certainty to communities across Tasmania, particularly on the West Coast, North West Coast and East Coast and beyond. Of course, those errors and missteps trace all the way back to 2023, when the Environment Minister acquiesced to the wishes of three activist groups: the Bob Brown Foundation, the Australia Institute and the Albanese government-funded Environmental Defenders Office, to place the entire existence of the industry, its workers and regional communities under severe threat. Outrageously, the minister has kept this review running right up until now and had no plans to end it even before the election. In the process, she created for Tasmanian workers, especially on the state's west coast, what the local mayor, Shane Pitt, has described as cruel and a living hell. Clearly, a lot of MPs in Labor would have liked the review to continue, but at least it does appear that this bill finally puts a halt to it. And let me echo the point made by Salmon Tasmania CEO Luke Martin on the 21st of March, that this legislation is not by any means a complete fix. The legislation is also a long way from perfect with respect to the reconsideration regime in the EPBC Act. It still needs several changes before it fully and adequately addresses the relevant matters. And we are therefore putting forward a series of amendments. If passed, the amendments we put forward will improve the reconsideration rules in the Act to provide more certainty for everyone, and certainly reduce the ad hoc green lawfare that now proliferates against EPBCA decisions that have been settled many years ago. Ours include a pious amendment that gives expression to some of the most immediate problems that loom on the horizon for the industry and its workers, especially if the Labor Party were to win the next election, and particularly if it were ultimately to form a minority government with the Greens. Each of our amendments is being moved in an attempt not just to better insulate the salmon industry from further outlandish reconsideration requests, but also in recognition of the increasing vulnerability of all industries, companies and jobs that have either been implicated to date or at risk of being targeted further in the future. Believe it or not, there are still some companies that have been waiting for the Minister to finalise reconsideration processes for nearly the entirety of this term of government and therefore of her term as the relevant Minister. Now, if the Albanese government, by way of this legislation, albeit after being dragged, kicking and screaming, to admit that it's made mistakes, then you would think it should at least commit to serious reforms and not to be half-hearted about it as they are, evidenced through this bill. Being so half-hearted only has the implication of introducing further uncertainty about the rules for this industry and others well into the future. It won't surprise anyone, certainly it won't surprise the people of Tasmania, and especially in the salmon industry, that Australia now suffers from the second highest level of green lawfare anywhere in the world. On the environment, moreover, let's be clear that Australia should always strive to ensure that whatever we do in our country has minimal adverse impact on our unique and precious natural environment. And that includes ensuring that endangered species are protected. However, the Albanese government has completely failed to take the relevant steps to help improve the future prospects of either the species in question or the salmon workers. Reductions or closures of the salmon farming industry's operations on the west coast of Tasmania, as long seems to have been the Minister's plan, would cause thousands of direct and indirect job losses. These impacts would be devastating at a local level, including threatening the entire existence of the town of Stratham and other nearby regional communities, because there are simply no obvious replacement industries or adequate employment possibilities in those areas. The Coalition has said on many occasions that we believe this Minister's approach has been reprehensible. It has provided none of the necessary urgency or certainty, and in the case of the salmon workers in particular, has only created heightened anxiety and stress. Science should have been better respected. In keeping with this point, it is very important to note the significant findings of a wealth of scientific studies and observations over the last 15 months. They have included reports from the Tasmanian Environment Protection Authority, the Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies, and Dr. Ian Wallace, and commentary from the University of Tasmania's Professor Barry Brook. Among other conclusions, these studies and observations have pointed to manifest improvements in water quality in the Macquarie Harbour, to no further declines in recent years in skate numbers, the threatened species, and instead to stabilisation and positive signs for growth, and to major flaws in some of the original modelling that was provided to the Threatened Species Scientific Committee. They also indicate that any threat to the existence of skates is due to a multitude of many different factors. Such findings are obviously also underscored by the fact that, unlike in Macquarie Harbour, the skate became all but extinct many years ago in Bathurst Harbour. That is an area of Tasmania in which salmon farming has never been practiced. For all these reasons and many others, the strong view of the Coalition is that the skate population and the salmon industry can clearly coexist sustainably at Macquarie Harbour, and that this provides the most balanced and positive outcome for everyone. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.